Hello, my name is Mariah Gillenwater.
And my name is Courtney Byrns. We are doing our presentation together on oppression of children through child labor. We're using a global focus for this presentation. In this section, we will be discussing definitions of child labor and a little history, some of the current issues and statistics on child labor. The definition of child labor: children who are working outside the international legal framework, specifically emphasized for children in employment. Labor that is performed by a child who is under the minimum age specified for the kind of work by national legislation. Hazardous work or labor that jeopardizes the physical, mental, or moral well-being of a child. Unconditional worst forms of child labor, which are internationally defined as slavery, trafficking, debt bondages, and other forms of forced labor. Forced recruitment of children for use in armed conflict, prostitution, and pornography, and illicit activities. The bottom line is children who are too young to be working are working in less than ideal situations.
International Labor Organization sets international laws and has definitions of and laws around child labor. Most recent laws are outlined in the UN's Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Historical context: children labor became an issue in the 1800s when the Industrial Revolution created huge amounts of jobs in factories. Poor children are now expected to enter the workforce to help provide for their families. There are no laws or regulations surrounding work at this time, so children are exploited for their size and energy levels. Factories are often unclean, and workers are expected to stay on the job for many hours without a break. The picture over here is boys working in dirty factories around the 30s.
Children were used for cleaning jobs in factories, and they were exploited because they had small fingers that were very useful for assembly and reaching into little nooks and crannies. And many children actually developed health problems because of their involvement in this kind of work.
Current issues. A form of child labor that is gaining increasing attention is that of child domestic labor. This form of labor is most difficult to track because of the often hidden context in which it takes place. Domestic work can include doing domestic chores, caring for children, tending the garden, running errands, and helping their employers run small businesses, amongst other tasks.
As you can see in the picture, this boy is very underfed. You can see his ribs and stuff, and he's working in a factory and what appears to be making spools of yarn. The kids who are doing like the domestic labor really go unnoticed because it's hard to tell whether they are being exploited or not. Many families use their children to do chores and to go run errands for them, and in most countries it's not illegal for children to work for their families after a certain age, so those laws are kind of gray. Most people who are employed as domestic laborers are also paid under the table, so it's really hard to tell who is actually doing these tasks as jobs and not just doing them for busy work or something else.
Statistics of child labor: 160 million children globally are engaged in child labor. 85 million are involved in work that endangers their health, safety, and development. In 2014, the U.S. Department of Labor is believed to be engaged with child labor, including 106 goods from 74 countries. This graph is about the amount of laborers that is directly employed, which is 6%, and 94% of the laborers is part of which hidden workforce, which is paid indirectly by the companies.
This slide talks about work that endangers their health, safety, and development, and that's considered hazardous labor, and it's most common for boys, and domestic labor is one of the most common types of child labor for girls. Human trafficking has risen in recent years, and it's largely contributed to the amount of child labor.
In this section, we'll discuss the populations most affected by child labor and some risk factors. Populations affected by child labor include child labor most prevalent in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. Over half of the child laborers live in Asia. The highest rate of hazardous work in sub-Saharan Africa.
Child labor is extremely common among poor families.
So, the children who are involved in child labor are often from families that cannot afford to take care of the children without the extra money that they can bring in. Some families even sell their children to child traffickers to earn money and to get rid of the burden of caring for the child long term.
Risk factors.
Children who are domestic workers are at very high risk of physical, psychological, and sexual abuse, inhuman living conditions, denial of access to health care, little to no education, from very poor families, and do not have
opportunities to break cycle, and they are expected to earn income to help support their families.
We talked about some of the abuse that child laborers can be a victim to. It's really common that the employers that they work for can be abusive, and then also their families can be abusive because of a cycle that just constantly repeats itself, where the parents were themselves child laborers, and because they did not have the opportunity to receive an education, they are forced to have their children be child laborers as well.
These children work in poor conditions. Many of the places that child laborers work in are not clean. The factories are sweatshops that employ them are often without heating and air, plumbing, and bathrooms. And clearly in the picture, it shows that the children are working on the ground and are exposed to sunlight while working.
Many of the young girls who are brought into child labor are often forced to be involved in some sort of sexual situation, so that is also very damaging to the children. And most of the countries that it's very common for child labor to occur in actually don't have very many laws around labor, so there's not a whole lot of government on the conditions that they are allowed to work in. Like in the United States, we have a lot of laws about having bathroom breaks and being able to go on lunch and stuff, and that's just not existent in these countries.
Children miss out on childhood activities. Child laborers miss out on education, and proper connections to family and friends. The picture is showing, it's just a historical depiction of child laborers advocating for their rights.
It was very common for women who were kind of involved in the suffrage movement to try to help these children after they were involved in trying to petition for their own rights, they realized that a lot of children in the lower classes were missing out on fundamental things like education and being able to experience a proper childhood by having time to go outside and play and really develop connections with their friends and family. There's actually a lot of literature, like classic works around child labor that you guys can look into, and in the comment section I can leave some recommendations for that too.
In this section, we're going to talk about how the values and ethics line up against the issues of child labor. In the NASW Code of Ethics, there are 2 values that apply to child labor and 2 ethical codes.
So the first value that we believe would apply to the issue of child labor is the value of service. And the NASW Code of Ethics states that social workers' primary goal is to help people in need and to address social problems. Social workers elevate service to others above self-interest, and social workers draw on their knowledge, values, and skills to help people in need and to address social problems. Social workers are encouraged to volunteer some portion of their professional skills with no expectation of significant financial return, which is considered pro bono service. So it is our responsibility as social workers to provide for a change effort for these children, even if it's not directly involved with our jobs. The second value is social justice, and the NASW code says that social workers challenge social injustice. Social workers pursue social change, particularly with and on behalf of vulnerable and oppressed individuals and groups of people, which is obviously these children. Social workers' social change efforts are focused primarily on issues of poverty, unemployment, discrimination, and other forms of social injustice. These activities seek to promote sensitivity to and knowledge about oppression and cultural and ethnic diversity. Social workers strive to ensure access to needed information, services, and resources, equality of opportunity, and meaningful participation in decision-making for all people. So, a lot of people aren't even aware of the issue of child labor globally. As we talked about in the beginning of our class, many people don't know that the clothes and products that we buy at Walmart, the Good American Company, is actually produced from child labor. So it's our job to kind of open people's eyes and show them what is really happening behind the scenes. The first ethical principle that we have concerning the issue of child labor is Section 6.01, which is social welfare. The code states that social workers should promote the general welfare of society from local to global levels and the development of people, their communities, and their environments. Social workers should advocate for living conditions conducive to the fulfillment of basic human needs and should promote social, economic, political, and cultural values in institutions that are compatible with the realization of social justice. So these children, without working, are not going to be able to achieve their basic needs for life. They're probably not going to be able to have food, not going to be able to have proper clothing and housing. So it's our job to try to fix this problem so that they can have all those things. The second section that we highlighted that would apply to the issue of child labor is 6.04, and there are 4 sections, and we chose A, B, and D because we felt that C didn't really apply. So A states that social workers should engage in social and political action that seeks to ensure that all people have equal access to the resources, employment, services, and opportunities they require to meet their basic human needs and to develop fully. Social workers should be aware of the impact of the political arena on practice and should advocate for changes in policy and legislation to improve social conditions in order to meet basic human needs and promote social justice. And we just talked about how it's our job to make sure that everybody is provided for their basic human needs. B states that social workers should act to expand choice and opportunity for all people with special regard for vulnerable, disadvantaged, oppressed, and exploited people and groups. So obviously these kids fall into almost all of those categories. And D says that social workers should act to prevent and eliminate domination of, exploitation of, and discrimination against any person, group, or class on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, color, sex, sexual orientation, age, marital status, political belief, religion, or mental or physical disability. So, obviously the age falls into this, class falls into this, so it's our job to make sure that just because these are young, poor people, that they're not being exploited.
In this section, we will be talking about ways to address the issues of child labor. Some of the current efforts to combat child labor include corporate approaches to child labor mainly revolved around those that are found in social policy. Human rights organizations play a large role in creating child-centered legislation and policies to combat. The United Nations created the Conventions on Children's Rights.
Currently, the efforts to stop the use of child labor have revolved around shunning companies that are known for using it. It is expected that for companies to prosper in the modern era, that they must adhere to a certain social code in the production of their products, and this includes treating their employees humanely and refraining from the use of child labor. Human rights organizations have tried to help create policies to reduce the amount of child laborers around the globe. The United Nations Conventions on Children's Rights contain policies concerning child labor. However, the United States has yet to ratify it.
Areas for change include approaches to change, holistic and created around a specific context of the issue. Decent and secure labor, increase family income, facilitate attendance. They are not approach with a coding learning approach. This is the situation works. Create alternative income for families. This includes welfare programs. Allow children to continue learning as long as they attend school.
So, most of the literature that we found surrounding the issue of child labor seems to support efforts to help reduce the need for child labor instead of simply banning child labor outright. This means that solutions to the problem should actually take into account that the income provided by these children is needed. Without the extra money, these children may starve. We talked about that previously, that they may not be able to have proper clothing or housing either. Allowing children to participate in work programs through school could be a great solution to the issue, or creating a welfare system in the third world countries that child labor is most common may help.
Also, other areas for change includes a shift away from zero-tolerance policies to harm reduction laws, providing art programs for kids in school, increased knowledge of fair and decent employers programs, access to a database on employers.
So, social work principles are based on a do-no-harm model. Creating policies that have very strict guidelines around child labor could mean that more harm is done to these children than when they were working. The children who are child laborers often depend on the money they earn to be able to have a home, clothes, and food, as we discussed previously. Switching to an approach that aims to help these children meet their basic needs while still being able to have a childhood is the best option. Increasing knowledge about employers could also be very beneficial in addressing child labor. If parents and children can have access to a database that explains the working conditions and attitudes of the people they are hoping to work for, then it could allow for better employment opportunities and more accountability for employers. Ryan discussed in their article a interesting idea about creating databases for people who are seeking employment, that they can kind of post like a Yelp review of their employers, and that it could allow for parents and children who are trying to seek employment to say, oh man, I really don't want to work for them because they have all these awful reviews. And it would help promote companies that are actually treating their employees fairly and allowing the child laborers to have school time and time off, and are helping to support the families that they do employ.
Some funding issues. Many businesses in the United States will probably oppose change because the products will probably increase in price. International efforts means that international funds are able to provide funding for change. Third world countries are child laborers as pregnant, have no welfare system, which means that they have no funding for possible programs to prevent child labor. This girl over here to the right picture, she was selling ice cream throughout the summer to get funds for her school.
To go to school.
So using international funds can be very beneficial because we can take money from all kinds of different pots throughout the world instead of just it being relied upon for that one single country. And as we discussed, third world countries by definition have no welfare program, so they don't have any sort of funding set aside to try to help these people. So it's going to be needed that to kind of start this up, that they're going to need some outside help. The nations who aim to reduce the need for child labor can donate these funds to help set up third world countries. Like in our area, I know a lot of people rely on TANF programs to try and help bolster their income for a little bit as they try to get their feet after, possible employment issues. We have unemployment funds. Also, schools here are public, meaning kids don't have to pay for their schools. Like this girl was having to worry about having to pay for her school uniforms and her books and stuff, and that's not an issue here in America. So it's really important to look at problems like that when we're looking at change and how our money is going to be able to be best used. These are our references that we used for our research, and then of course we also use the NASW Code of Ethics. We did not cite that because we felt like it was kind of obvious, but we appreciate you listening to our presentation, and please leave any questions that you have in the comment section on our discussion. Thank you so much.